Biased in sampling. Recall, the goal of sampling is to obtain information about the population. The reliability of the information obtained is only as good as the sample collected. The sample should represent the population. If the results of a sample are not representative of the population, then the sample has bias. There are three sources of bias in sampling: sampling bias, non-response bias, and response bias. Sampling bias means that the technique used to obtain the members of the sample tend to favor one part of the population over another. Any convenient sampling has sampling bias because the individuals or members of the sample are not chosen through a random sample. As we mentioned earlier, we would never use convenient sampling to create a reliable sample. Sampling bias results in an undercoverage, which occurs when the proportion of one segment of the population is lower in the sample than it is in the population. Another type of bias can occur with non-response bias. This exists when individuals selected to be in the sample who do not respond to the survey have different opinions from those who do respond to the survey. If we have a self-selected survey, for example, you may have non-response bias in teacher evaluations. People who thought the instructor was okay, didn't have any problems with them, they may not respond to the survey at all, whereas students who had issues with the course may be very vocal or more likely to respond to the surveys. Okay, all surveys are going to suffer from some type of non-response bias. Response bias exists when the answers on the survey do not reflect the true feelings of the respondent. For example, you could have interviewer error. A trained interviewer is going to be essential in getting accurate information out. People may not always give the truth. Do you cheat on your taxes? Have you ever cheated on your spouse? Have you ever, backed into a car and not left a note? So they're not always going to give honest responses. Misrepresented answers is another situation that could give us a response bias. Some survey questions result in responses that misrepresent the facts or flat out lies. Okay, wording of questions. So if they're worded to give you a bias toward one feeling versus another. Do you oppose an increase in taxes? Do you favor an increase in taxes? You should probably use both words in the sentence. Do you favor or oppose? Then another situation is the wording of questions or words. So you may want to, in some of the surveys, have in there, do you favor or oppose? Some of them, do you oppose or favor? Sometimes it may not just be the words, but the actual order of the questions that could lead to bias. Alright, let's look at some examples and see if we can determine the type of bias that exists and if we could suggest a remedy. So this will not be necessarily all have the same remedy there. So let's just look at an example. The village of Oaklawn wishes to conduct a study regarding the income level of households within the village. The village manager selects 10 homes in the southwest corner of the village and sends an interviewer to the homes to determine the household income. Okay, so this is a sampling bias. They did not use a random sample. They only sample people in the southwest corner of the village, so certain areas of the village were unrepresented, okay, or undercovered. So they need to use a random sample so that they randomly select 10 homes in the entire village would be a better way to avoid that sampling bias. An anti-gun advocate wants to estimate the percentage of people who favor stricter gun laws. He conducts a nationwide survey of 1,203 randomly selected 18-year-olds and older. The interviewer asked the respondents, do you favor harsher penalties for individuals who sell guns illegally? So this is really has some leading questions in it. So this is a response bias. It's a poorly worded question. Okay, we could offer up another wording. Do you favor or do you oppose harsher penalties for individuals who sell guns illegally? Okay, that would even be one way to fix it. You don't necessarily want words that lean them toward having one opinion or another. Cold Stone Creamery is considering opening a new store in O'Fallon. Before opening the store, the company would like to know the percentage of households in O'Fallon that regularly visit an ice cream shop. The market researcher obtains a list of households in O'Fallon and randomly selects 150 of them. He mails a questionnaire to the 150 households and asks about ice cream eating habits and flavor preferences. Of the 150 questionnaires, 4 are returned. So this is a non-response bias. Suggestions for that, potentially they could follow up with a phone call, they could follow up with a visit. There could be a better way of selecting those persons. You could actually go out to that area and do a different type of survey, not necessarily convenience, but do a different type of survey of the people in the area. Suppose you are conducting a survey regarding the sleeping habits of students. From a list of registered students, you obtain a simple random sample of 100 students. One question is, how much sleep do you get? Okay, how much sleep do you get? So this could potentially be a response bias. Poorly worded question. You may have some issues here with the response, not understanding. It helps to give some parameters. How much do you sleep do you get on a weeknight? And it could be even choices. Do you get between, 0 to 2 hours, 2 to 4, 4 to 6, 6 to 8, etc. How much on a weeknight? How much on a weekend? Okay, so there could be different ways of wording that question to get more detail in your answers. A health teacher wishes to do research on the weight of college students. She obtains the weights of all students in her 9 a.m. class by looking at their driver's license or state IDs. So first of all, this could be sampling biased, because she's definitely used a convenience sample. So we know that all members are not, all college students are not represented in that particular class. Could also be a response bias, because they probably didn't tell the truth about how much they weighed on their driver's license. Okay, so if the health teacher wishes to do this research, then there could be a better way. She could do a random sample of the students and then actually have those students come in and be weighed. All right. A magazine is conducting a study on the effects of infidelity in a marriage. The editors randomly select 400 women whose husbands were unfaithful and ask, do you believe a marriage can survive when a husband destroys the trust that may exist between a husband and a wife? So this is going to give us a definite response bias. It's, a leading question, or we could say it's poorly worded. The husband has destroyed the trust. So there could be a better way to do this. And infidelity in the marriage is not necessarily one way. What if the women were the ones who were cheating? Okay, women whose husbands were unfaithful and ask. So it just depends on what the question was and what the survey was. It just about infidelity, or was it about when men cheat on women, or vice versa? So the wording of that question could definitely lead to a response bias. Suppose you're conducting a survey regarding illicit drug use among teenagers in Baltimore School District. You obtain a cluster sample of 12 schools within the district and sample all sophomore students in the randomly selected schools. So it sounds like the sampling was done fairly accurately. The survey is administered by the teachers. So this is going to be a response bias based on the viewer? Do you really think the teenagers are going to answer the questions truthfully when they're administered by the teacher? Okay, perhaps if it was an anonymous survey, they would have a better chance of getting accurate results without bias. Okay, the goal of this section is just for you to recognize that bias can exist when we are using a sample of data. You want to do everything you can to avoid as much bias as possible.